Hello and welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores earth and sky and the spirits that reside there through art, literature, magic, culture, and creative action. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. Okay, hello and welcome back to another riveting episode of Liminal Light, where we return to talk about the two lunations which fall within the 28-day span of the moon's cycle around the zodiac. We look at it from what we call a lunar zodiacal perspective, because we're looking at what's commonly referred to as the lunar mansions. We situate ourselves largely in the prayer to the list of the 28 shapes of the world from the prayer to Mene, from the Greek magical papyri. And then we use that as kind of a matrix from which to reach into all of the traditions of 28ism, into the Picatrix, into the Nakshatras, into the Chinese lunar mansions, into the grimoire traditions. And then we kind of loop around through all of the shapes and mythos and images and kind of functions that we find through all of that material. And we talk a little mundane astrology and look at the lunations themselves and kind of make predictions, but predictions also that are largely in a lunar zodiacal perspective about what's passing through on the subtle layers, through your subconscious, through your body, through your creativity, through your emotions, the kind of more animal, natural, sublunar experience, rather than just the circumstances and occurrences, which we might refer to the 12-sign, more solar zodiacal system for that. And we do reference that constantly because obviously it's all interrelated, but we're going to lean way more towards the lunar perspective. And so with that said, hello, Elodie.
Hello, Chris.
And you are?
I'm Elodie, calling from Newfoundland.
I'm currently actually in upstate New York right now in the Catskills. So yeah, you got to drop a pin, motherfucker. But here we are. And we always at the end of the episodes say, wow, it's going to be exciting to see how this plays out. And I noticed that we never actually go back and look at and discuss what happened last time to kind of catch back up and comment on it. So maybe we'll try to do a little bit of that this time.
Yeah, so the new moon was in Cat Mansion on the 6th of October, so almost a month ago now, because we're arriving to the new moon again. And that one was really loaded in like Cat Mansion. And we talked about things being in sort of limbo or liminality, like crossing doors, but really being in the crossing of the door. Whoops, sorry, I lost my notes.
Oh yeah, because we didn't plan for that. Maybe
that's fine.
Can you get them still?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And you know, at the time of the new moon in Cat Mansion, Mercury was retrograde, Mars was in Libra. Mars was involved in the new moon very closely, and I feel like there was something kind of like aggravating, you know, irritating about the new moon at that point, like this sort of not knowing where things are going, which most of the time we can sustain, and then sometimes we can't. And I think that was like a big part of the beginning of October, just like how it played out. There was like a lot of people that told me they just like, there's a lot of stuff that came up, but it was kind of inconclusive, you know. It was not like the propulsion of like a new moon, like, okay, this is what's happening, it's clear. It was kind of like very back and forward, very like, I'm not sure, maybe this, maybe that, you know.
Yeah, which is interesting because it was before all the planets turned direct too. So, you know, we had this like cat new moon that was initiating a cycle upon Mars, and cats, you know, if you watch them, they don't do things directly necessarily. They kind of sneak in and out. Like they, you know, you'll see them make one or two really deliberate moves every once in a while when they're hunting prey, you know, when they're pouncing on a mouse or something. But even then they kind of slither through the grass to get where they're going. It's not a direct path. And yeah, you can see in this chart here that I have up, if you're watching the video, that there's Jupiter's retrograde, Saturn's retrograde, Mercury's retrograde, Uranus is retrograde, and then at least, you know, Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury all go direct in the course of that past time period after that. But at the time, yeah, it's like irritated, you know, it's like an irritated cat, you know, it's like,
yeah,
it's funny that that's what it was. And then we had to discuss that, you know, last month, but then the experience of it was like, yeah, we're just kind of like irritated cats sitting at the threshold, not knowing whether we're going to cross or not.
Yeah, and it was opposing Chiron, all that jazz. It was kind of just like, oh God, like, yeah, like cayenne pepper in your eyes, you know.
Yeah, and even if you listen to the episode, I think we even kind of are argumentative in it. You can tell that everyone's getting their fur rubbed the wrong way, and we're getting our hackles up and such. You know, I don't know if that's when we decided to like have a beer before we recorded or not. But
yeah. And then the full moon, I think, you know, there was like Saturn and was it Jupiter and Mercury turned direct by that point. So
yeah, Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, and Pluto, right?
Yeah, so everything is kind of direct now, and there's the full moon. And we had talked about the place. So the full moon was in Bull Mansion, which spans between 2542 Aries and 834 Taurus. Which is considered the third lunar mansion. So we call it Bull Mansion. And, you know, even though it's a full moon and it's a process of culmination, there was something emerging at that point. And we had talked about this sort of feeling of a new moon, like emergence coming through. So it's, you know, there's clarity, but with the clarity, there's sort of reset also that was allowed, I think, which is very typical of that mansion. It's like there's a lot of traction that can be gained. I talked to a lot of people. Well, I saw also on social media people, it was very, very varied in terms of like how people experience that full moon.
Yeah, I remember we kind of predicted that it would have an initiatory or beginning or getting things going kind of feel to it. I mean, it is like tropically in the 12 sign zodiac in Aries, so the sign of initiation and firing things off. But in the lunar zodiacal perspective, being in Bull, you still get that very generative, like gestative kind of getting the feet like put in the muck and getting things moving, and all of these kind of these. It's one of the first 7 of the lunar shapes, which seem to have to do with kind of the emergence of creation itself, you know, kind of where things kind of like where the natural world even comes up out of, you know, because after Bull we get Scarab too, which that becomes very explicit. But at that point it's kind of like just it's like as if the beginning of the stopwatch of time starts all clogged with muck and then gets moving, you know. And
yeah, exactly.
At the time we did say, when the lunation happened, I remember we noted later, we're like, wow, this full moon really feels like a new moon, which I don't know if this is like trade secrets or not, but I did catch that in astro crypto world, where they're kind of looking at new moons being the highs of crypto numbers in the value market. They noticed that lunation was a rare occurrence where it flipped. So not only did we personally experience it, it felt like more like a new moon than a full moon. There was other people tracking other kinds of statistical or whatever information also experience a kind of lunation flip around this time.
And I noticed a lot of people, I think that's just because Mercury and Jupiter were moving direct, but a lot of people, since there's so many people now following astrology that also practice like electional or magical forms of astrology, I noticed a lot of people launching new business around the new moon.
Yeah.
Or the full moon.
The new/full/new moon.
Yeah, and
of October 20th.
Of October 20th. Yeah, there's like an element also in traditional delineation, like in the Picatrix, it says firmly incarcerate captives. So there's like some efforts to liberate yourself from circumstance that might be difficult, or it was illuminated in some ways. For me, it played literally in a way that I just like felt like super sick with the flu on the day of the full moon. So I was literally incarcerated to my bed. But my immune system got like a major reset in that sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that was, I mean, in the personal sense, I was waiting for a bunch of lumber to come in for an installation project that I've been kind of waiting this whole time that Mercury retrograde was on order, or literally I was told that logging trucks were stuck in the muck and they couldn't get out because it kept raining and they just couldn't get traction. It was like so literal, you know, because it's a full moon in Aries. So like, why would that be the case? But then when you look at the lunar zodiacal level and you see bull, you're like, oh yeah, totally. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Like stuck in the muck, can't, like, it's going to take longer to get going. And then once all these planets turned direct, it's around this moon, it was like, okay, time to get to work. And it was it's a slog. Just if anyone's ever started like these complicated kind of carpentry like projects, the beginning part is always like, okay, what's going on here? How do we make this start happening? You know?
Yeah, overall though, it felt more like the new moon in October than the actual new moon in Libra. The new moon in Libra was just like an annoyance.
It was like, what? You cut out for a second.
It was like the beginning of annoyance. Like it was just like highlighting annoyance or like whatever. But the full moon was more like, okay, I'm starting to like see where things are heading.
Yeah, it's like where you put the red X's on the calendar to say like, okay, another day done. But it's like if you did that at the beginning of the month and you were just like, fuck all these days this month, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's annoying. Okay.
So we're moving to a new moon in Leopard Mansion. Which is Leopard Mansion falls between 834 Scorpio and 2125 Scorpio. So that's the 18 Lunar Mansion, which is associated with the leopard animal. So this new moon occurs on November 4th at 1844 here in Newfoundland. So not sure what time.
Looks
Eastern.
Like 5 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah. So this is the beginning, more or less, of eclipse season, even though this new moon is not an eclipse. I personally kind of consider that we're on eclipsey territory at that point, just because of Uranus exactly opposing that new moon. And we can talk about that in a bit. So when it comes to this place in the zodiac, in the lunar zodiac that we associate with leopard, some of the things that came through our research in a year, there's themes of poison, the body being poisoned and then healed. It's a very body oriented place, but like more so internal body, corruption of the body. Sometimes waterways, bodies of water, pleasure and pain, overripe fruits, smells, wounds, cavities and decay, pain, feasting, but in an exaggerated way, like overdoing it to the point where everyone is fighting and destroying things.
Definitely.
Intoxication.
What's the name for that? Where it's the
like a brawl?
Yeah, like some sort of feasting frenzy. It's like when the chum is in the water and the sharks come.
Yeah, and then intoxicated by desire that leads to corruption, all experiences passing through the body, the good, the bad, and then going beyond desires to the point of self-destruction. And the reason we speak of these association with leopard, like it doesn't seem really like obvious right off the bat, like this, like if you think of leopard animal. But what we noticed through the years of research, every time the moon passed here, is a lot of time we ended up drinking.
Yeah, it's totally, you know, because Elodie's in Newfoundland and I'm usually in Maine, and like we were separate, but we'd both end up being like, it was like blackout level drinking, you know, at times, but not to just like divulge like our habits, but it was like, yeah, like see you later style drinking. And then,
see you later style drinking, but it was very consistent to the point that after months of research, we realized, okay, Leopard Mansion is coming. Yeah, that's usually the drinking mansion. That's
because the reason it was so notable is because we were, for those who don't know, we were doing automatic writing and automatic drawing for about 2 years straight, every night, like to connect with the animal or the object of the shape of, you know, where the moon was. And there are times where we would miss one and like it was often on leopard, or sometimes it would end up on lion, because, you know, the moon can switch during the day or during that calendar date, and there's like elasticity. But when we'd be like, oh, whoops, I just totally forgot to write or totally forgot to draw tonight, it would be like, oh, leopard strikes again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why like I said, like themes of poison and corruption of the body. Traditionally, this mansion, you know, the Lunar Mansion 15, in traditional texts is associated with like treatment of the stomach and not good for excessive eating or eating unknown food. Mariam, I think it's Mariam, where they have like all of the traditional delineation of the Lunar Mansion. Ashmal says receive and make medicine. So there's definitely something about like the stomach and digestion. More extensively, we've pinpointed to the liver, which again kind of parallels Mars rulership of this place in the solar zodiac. Mars ruling Scorpio, and this Lunar Mansion falling in Scorpio. Mars being associated with anger and the liver being associated with anger in traditional Chinese medicine. So there's really something livery. There's really something about like just overdoing it, like to the point of poisoning yourself, but in a way that's like kind of compulsive or not really conscious. It's not really for pleasure. It's more just like this compulsion to do.
Yeah. And, which is interesting because, you know, the leopard is the vehicle of Dionysus, and the leopard skin is the clothing of Shiva. And in both cases, it's pointing to Bacchanal and the Bacchants, you know, like the Sanskrit term for, I think in Sanskrit, Bacchant means hero. And it's like a certain kind of almost like tantric devotee, often associated with Shiva. But then those who follow Dionysus and his revels are also like involved in the Bacchanal. And in both cases, it's the leopard there symbolizing those urges, those particular animal compulsions, the rather wild and extravagant, uproarious, like and just like getting down and dirty. But we noticed, you know, when you speak of the Chinese medicine component and the liver, that if you've heard us speak about this before, if you were at the lecture that at the Astromagia conference, we showed that in the Prayer to Mene, where these animal shapes derive from, before the animal shapes are listed, it lists 14 sounds related to the cosmogenesis of the universe that the PGM describes over and over. That there are these 7 sounds that distribute into the breath of the 14 sounds, which distribute into the shapes of the 28, etc. And that when they mention the 14 sounds, they go through, we'll talk about this with the eclipse too, but we took the 14 axes of the 28 shapes and applied them in the same order to the sounds and say, well, maybe because it describes 14 and then 28. So maybe these are like the 14 axes. So the axis that leopard appears on is the scarab leopard axis, which is interesting because, like, speaking of Shiva and tantric mysticism, the scarab involves itself in one of what in tantric world that's called the 5 M's, one being like feces, the 5 like substances you normally in Hinduism you don't have anything to do with, but in Tantra you have to like do some sort of alchemical magical function with. And anyway, the scarab like creates this dung ball and then emerges from it, and that's like the dung ball is almost the symbol of the sun carrying over. And then the leopard, like I said, relates to Dionysus and Shiva. So it almost is this like tantric axis across mythos, but the sound that would land on the 14 sounds is hissing. And then if you look in the 6 sounds that are related to different levels of the organs in Chinese traditional medicine, the Lu Ziju, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that sound hiss is also related to the level of the liver. So there's some sort of holistic continuity between all of these places, that it's, if you're in a tantric mode, you're going to want to support your liver. Like if you're like maybe before and after you go into leopard mode, you're going to want to take your milk thistle. But actually, in this case, what the Picatrix suggests taking is staghorn. So sumac. It says like for the details for making the talisman, which is for taking away fevers, to make a wax snake. So that also fits with Dionysus and Shiva, and then staghorn incense. And so, sumac is good for you. It's packed with antioxidants. I made a note of the things that sumac is good for. Oh yeah, it's rich in antioxidants. And it decreases cholesterol, it lowers blood sugar, and it relieves pain, among other things, but the talisman is for taking away fevers. So this is all kind of like, and why would what is this fever from? Maybe it's from poison of some sort, like even Shiva is said to have swallowed poison, and that's why his throat is blue, so it's this like, and the swallowing of the poison, obviously, when we like loop back around to Dionysus, is probably wine, and it's probably drugged wine, that like both brings you to the ecstatic state, but also poisons you, Yeah,
I like what you said about like the tantric axis. It's true, because it's like, okay, well, if this mansion is actually good for treating the stomach and healing digestive stuff and not good for excessive eating or eating unknown food, why are we compelled to do that here?
Yeah.
So there's something fundamentally sort of tantric about it. It's like transcending the body, it's definitely not like the calm pastures of other mansion. Like it's you would think like, oh, this is a healing mansion, but it's not really a healing mansion, because it's just like how do you say, like predisposed for healing. It's a healing mansion because it's predisposed for destruction and poison.
For what? Sorry, you cut out.
I said it's not like just a healing mansion in itself. It's a healing mansion because there's predisposition for destruction and hurting the body, and therefore that's why maybe also it is a place of healing.
Yeah, it's the two types of healing. It's the healing of that you receive through ecstatic behavior. That's like healing isn't only making the body healthier it's also, you know, kind of getting stuff. There's a cathartic quality to it, but then it's the healing that you have to do after the catharsis as well, where you have to nurse yourself back to health after. It's like all the potatoes and potato chips and coffee and like croissants that you eat like when you're hungover, you know?
Yeah, I notice it's kind of like a place usually, you know, when you black out when you're drinking, it's because you didn't eat.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
It's not so gluttonous as opposed to just like, I'm just going to dismiss my body now and just take it to the max.
Which is also your body kind of being like, let's fast before we do the entheogenic thing.
Totally. And that could show up differently for people. Like a lot of people are not predisposed to alcohol, but there might be other type of catharsis. Now, speaking of catharsis, I think this is really even more so reinforced by the fact that Uranus is opposing exactly this moon. So we absolutely have to talk about that, because there is this super sort of volatile cathartic element to this new moon. So
totally.
And it might not necessarily, you know, it sounds like when you hear volatile, it sounds like, oh, you know, like things are going to explode or there's going to be like a car accident, but it might not necessarily be that. It like Uranus is also associated with like lightning strikes and ideas and just like sudden realization. So there can be an element of catharsis that just kind of like suddenly like makes sense, you know. It's just like suddenly just out of left field something kind of awakens you.
Not everyone in the world is going to be blacked out on this new moon, but the way I metaphorically think of it is because it's a new moon, because it's the beginning, it's an initiation, and the next lunation is a north node eclipse, like on Algol, which we'll talk all about. There's more to say about this new moon. I don't want to get ahead, but as far as that Uranus, it's sort of like Uranus is also voltage, right? It's like the volatility comes from there being this almost electricity, like this high amount of electricity. You know, when you're like high voltage area, danger, it's not like every time you go near a high voltage area, you get electrocuted and blow up, but like that possibility is there because that Uranus current is flowing through it. So it's almost as if like you're like in the midst of your leopard, I was going to, you know, like how you say like Leo line, like almost like Lepo line state, you know, like when you're in, like my metaphor is that that night you forget to eat, you drink too much wine, you turn on the music, you get lost in your ecstatic revelry. And during that blackout, you plug something in, you know, that that ends up having a voltage overload state when the eclipse happens. Like I think there's
I hear you.
There's a little bit of like, oh, I didn't remember. That was just kind of like minor detail while I was like screwing around. But yeah, that's when I plugged in the power tool, like not realizing that it was going to go crazy 2 weeks later, you know?
Well, on November 17, which is 2 days before the eclipse, you know, that's like 2 weeks later after this new moon, Mars will be in the same degree opposing Uranus, in the same degree as this new moon. Right, so leading to this first lunar eclipse of the season on Algol, you know, the Mars is in Scorpio for the first time, I think, since the beginning of like lockdown stuff, because Mars spent so much time in Aries last year. So it will be the first time since like this whole narrative began that Mars returns to its nocturnal home sign. So it's quite strong. And it opposes Uranus and the moon on November 17. And like the moon will be conjunct Uranus. And then 2 days later, the moon gets eclipsed in later degrees. Right,
because Uranus is moving so slow. It's like it's still there, so it gets re-referenced, and like, you know, Mars says like pushes the go button and the moon says, okay, yeah, let's make it physical, you know, and then 2 days later there's the eclipse. So it's kind of like there's some sort of tripwire that we're laying in our own life to like have this event later on, that we're kind of like it's getting set up. So we have to kind of, and there's so many things I want to say that are more for the talking about the eclipse.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Let's
What I wanted
let's
to I
go
wanted
ahead.
to just like speak of something about the body and the body component and the poison component, which you know, I think if we're looking at what's going on with the vaccines, there might be an
Yeah,
element of that, because this is like a foreign element being put
definitely.
into bodies. And Uranus sometimes also, I like to compare it to like Tourette.
Yeah,
Tourette syndrome. So it's like suddenly there's just like something that comes out, and it might be related to these things. You know, it might
yeah,
be just like a sudden flip of script, like completely
totally,
related to body and body autonomy and poison and
totally.
poisonous states.
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah,
that's going to be a lot to. I think that's going to be a lot of what the 2022 and beyond, beyond a little bit, like basically the Taurus, Scorpio axis, like eclipse axis cycle is like, you know,
and
it'll be about a lot of things, but I think one, you know, just seeing like the south node in Scorpio be like with the stinger, be like, okay, this, what I'm getting injected with is making me sick, and I have to like get away from it, decrease it, or purge it. And then
yeah,
the north node in Taurus being like, because we got to get real, we got to get back to nature, and also we got to get to work. So I think when we see stuff like in countries that have more extreme whatever pandemic protocols going on, such as Australia, we see major protests by unions against the injections, you know, like this, like down with the jab, let's, you know, labor rights. So I think that's going to be a big component. But let's hop back a little bit to the new moon in Leopard, because
I want to speak. Yeah, I want to speak
yeah,
of the place of Uranus in that new moon. It's actually sitting in Vulture Mansion, which kind of bring also this sort of like poisonous quality, I think, because
yeah,
vultures.
well, more of the interior body, more of like breaking into the guts, you know, because like
Yeah,
we'll see later that there's elements of the eclipse in what is it in again, in Falcon, and here the new moon in Leopard, both speaking in different ways to the interior body. So there's a lot of like, you know, part of that is internal compulsion, and part of that is, you know, the poison coming in and where it has to go. And then like you're saying with Vulture, this kind of like breaking in through to the interior darker layers of the internal body, because even the Picatrix calls Leopard Mansion, the 18th lunar mansion, the heart. And so when they say the heart, you know, they probably mean the organ of the heart, but they also, the way the ancients would think of the heart was both the mind rather than the brain being the mind. The brain was more like a radiator for when you got overheated, the phlegmatic fluids, you know, were thought to derive from the brain because it was gray and mushy, and cool you down. So helping to keep a cool head and not get overheated. Whereas the heart was where the mind was sitting in the ancient world, but also it was because of its proximity, but it was also related to the digestion. So they knew way more than modern people that, you know, the stomach is a brain, and that the heart is kind of where we think from. So the metabolism, you know, so all this stuff about like too much to eat, getting overexcited, and losing your mind, you know, all makes sense too.
yeah, totally. Yeah, so overall, this new moon is like kind of like this awareness of poison, or just being in a poison state, or, you know, like even on a more personal level, it would be like, like, where are your compulsion leading you to, you know? There's like such a compulsive element with Uranus opposing this new moon, on top of being this place of like irrationality and desires, you know?
Yeah, but yeah, and there's more healing and cool, you know, the Uranus thing is going to, like we were saying, run some high voltage through it. But aside from just like kind of the hot part of it, like when we did our when we were doing dream groups and collecting information of people's dreams and comparing them, we saw that this was kind of a hit with Leopard because multiple months in a row for multiple people, it all kind of clicked together that multiple people, several rounds in a row had dreamt about rock and roll bands, which is a weird one, but it is that kind of like the culture of rock and roll is over drinking and you know, kind of letting your body take over.
Yeah, it's like live fast, die young.
Yeah,
like, it's
totally.
really that vibe.
Yeah, totally. And then it was in your, you know, the ancients would be like, oh, it's Dionysus time. But then as moderns, not even thinking about what's going on, not even knowing about the mansions or the shapes or whatever, people seem to be dreaming of, like, I remember someone dreamt about AC/DC, someone dreamt about the Sex Pistols. Like, it was just kind of uncanny. But then if you look at the Grimorium Verum spirit, it's Clisthart, which is said to bring you day or night or light or dark whenever you ask. Like if it's day and you're like, I want it to be night right now. And it's said to be able to bring you the pleasures of either. And then the syncretized Kimbanda spirit to that is Eshu Tonquera, Eshu of the dark sanctuary. And so like we have this, the night or the day, and then the dark sanctuary and the pleasures of night or day. So that all seems to jive, you know, as well as the syncretized relationships do. But then when you look at the Picatrix and the talisman, not only do you make this wax snake and burn staghorn incense, but then you take a vessel and you bury it beneath your house, and you carry it. Then later you carry it if you're ill. And so it sort of makes sense that like this dark sanctuary is this place beneath the house, and that you find a hole and you have a vessel in this cool dark place. And it's sort of like creating night during the day is to go into a cool dark place underground, you know, to turn away from the objectives of the world and go into night mode. And then the leopard itself, you know, is like yellow with black spots. It's sort of like is the light and the darkness, you know. But I think since the talisman is for taking away fevers, there's this suggestion here almost of withholding the snake, and then the image from the Picatrix also is an adder, like a snake holding its tail above its head. So there's almost something that reminds me of Asclepian healing temples, you know.
That reminds me of what you were saying about tantrism again, like just like,
totally.
You know, you're just like poisoning your own self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're poisoning yourself. But like what happens in these Asclepian healing temples where you just go in and you hang out with snakes and you get healed? I don't know if you were so often administered medicine there as much as you went there for a vision of healing, you know? So It's sort of like if you're gonna go into your basement and drink too much vodka on this new moon, just make sure to like, at least, you know, you might be too drunk to take your notebook and write records, but maybe bring your phone and record some voice memos of things that kind of like notions that you have, you know?
Yeah, there's something, I was looking at leopard, like literal animal, and there's something kind of antisocial about them. Like they're pretty solitary creatures. And I think what compels people sometimes to go into these self-destructive mode is sort of like being disillusioned with the state of affairs and just being like, we only live tonight, you know? Yeah. And there's really this vibe here, like just this sort of like all of nothing or nothing vibe. So, you know, again, it's going to depend where it's happening. I'm looking at like other sort of traditional stuff associated with this mansion, and conspire against king, vengeance, which is interesting too, considering like the Uranus opposition. There's like this sort of like, fuck it, you know?
Well, yeah, it's funny that, again, that the connection between this mansion and then the eclipse later, because here we have the conspiring against king. And then later on, we'll see when we talk all about that there's the kind of in the, you know, the traditional material around Falcon Place, there's the concern that the king is reinstated to the throne to keep the natural world in order. So the conspiracy here, like, maybe on a mundane level, maybe on a personal level too, but it's almost like the king is overthrown here, or at least like there's some conspiracy along, like, surrounding leadership that corrupts it, and then later on the world subject to that authority ends up being also disrupted, in a way that even extends into nature. So again, these things we're talking about like, you can't trust the government, and they might be poisoning you, and like the phone today just was like, hey, do you accept these new iCloud terms? And of course, most people know about this. It's like what they're trying to protect against is child pornography, right? And like, so they basically want to look at whatever's in your phone and then be able to prosecute you if there's anything that they deem illegal in your phone. But they don't specify that it's just things to do with child pornography. It's basically if they catch you doing anything illegal, they can prosecute you just from having it in your phone. So like seeing these things kind of come into the mundane sphere, or the metaverse, as you say, like right as like there's this kind of like conspiring, these conspiring against kings, and this there, here we have like something mentioned conspiracy, and then as we'll see in a minute, like there's a lot of paranoia and upheaval around the eclipse coming after.
Yeah, so let's jump. I said pretty much what I had to say about this new moon. I did pull out some channeled writing from this mansion for Leopard Mansion. I don't know if you want me to read it.
Yes.
So this is channeled writing from almost exactly a year ago. This was on November 14, 2020. In a Leopard session. No eternity awaits you. My love line is inside out. I am a coma within your heart. My baseline by the beach is a papaya night grab with sex. But waiting for the time, the emblem of servitude slaving away. The beam through the flesh. Gaze into my body, for I am wicked in the way I wait for the eternal to unfold. Harden my heart. Green upon red turned to black metallic sphere in the colloid place. Egyptian shutdown. The fiery plant of endless shade. Pierce my lip with your teeth. No other man can do to me what my mother does to me in spades. A pearl inside, my binaural clutch. Superimposed with my stocking at night. Rip the banister of the wall because nothing escapes my sense of duty to the wilds. Inside the walls of the house, I roam and write my way on leaves of flesh. My body opens like a book. Don't deny the place where we are threaded together, soon to one another, sharing legs. A titanic tigress, panther, ocelot, out of focus, hard red point, the center of death, jungle me, mother bird, drink from the elixir of life. Pretty faithful to this place. I would always get a lot of tropical, humid places in the writing and in the drawings. There was always kind of like papayas and fronds and mist and like that kind of tropical fog, and it was always kind of like a feverish visualization of a wet, humid, hot atmosphere where there was carousing and drinking at night out till the early AM. Like, I don't know if anyone remembers what it was like to be in New Orleans before Hurricane Katrina, and like just this like dripping, lush, like heavy, heady, like, like drinking in public is allowed all throughout the city, all throughout the state. But so it's just like this, there'd just be these times where it's one big hot, like, it's oppressive heat, but people aren't feeling oppressed. They're just like not sleeping and just like saturating in alcohol. And like, but yeah, exactly. That's the vibe. I like, there's a word in this channel writing. It's written binaural clutch.
Yeah.
And we're coming to this eclipse now, talking about this eclipse, which happens on Algol, which is like a binary star. So
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, totally. Which also, we'll get more into this too, but the north node of the eclipse, the north node, is actually going to still be in Gemini, so that like kind of binaural nature gets doubled. Like this is a Taurus eclipse, but with the north node still in Gemini, so there's this kind of like weird nature to it where it's the last year and a half of eclipses and the next year and a half of eclipses kind of expressing simultaneously.
Yeah, so let's move on to this. So the partial lunar eclipse happens in Falcon, and Falcon Mansion is the 5th lunar mansion, which falls between 21-25 Taurus and 4-17 Gemini. And this takes place on November 19, early in the morning on the East Coast. So this is a partial lunar eclipse. It's the first one of this series, which will occur all through 2022. So it's actually initiating new sort of scenarios into the metaverse.
And the metaverse and the universe. Yeah. Which like now we have both, which is like thanks Gemini and this like binaural reality.
Thanks Satan and Gemini, we have metaverse.
Yeah, thanks to Satan, Gemini, and Algol.
Because this is a partial lunar eclipse, obviously it's not like total or whatever. I saw a lot of astrologers delineating it as like, okay, there's like definite sort of themes being initiated that will continue to play out specifically all through next year. But we're really talking about a different set of eclipses than the ones we've been in since like late 2020, which were happening on the Gemini Sagittarius axis. These ones begin on the Taurus Scorpio axis, and this particular one in Falcon Mansion.
Yeah, totally. I'm just gonna say a quick thing about in the more solar zodiacal mundane kind of approach. The past year and a half of North Node in Gemini and South Node in Sagittarius, I think largely had a lot to do with, South Node in Sagittarius is kind of like kiss your dreams goodbye. There's no hope. And like North Node in Gemini is like, all right, what are my options? And we saw that really kick off around the time that the uprisings began with the murder of George Floyd. And then if you remember, social media platforms went absolutely haywire at that time. And it was like this hyper aggregation of information. There was the black boxes, then don't post the black boxes, and you support this bail bond fund. No, don't do that. It's fake, or they have too much money already. And this aggregation of information was just at a totally insane pace. And now that the nodes are switching, I can already see for the past few weeks in clients' charts a switch to these themes, these Scorpio Taurus themes that are kind of like this power struggle has been burbling under the surface of my life for a while now. I'm really sick of it. What do I do about it? And it's coming to a head. And so things are kind of getting real now rather than just being only in the metaverse. So it's kind of like back to life, back to reality, but in a way that's kind of chaotic and uncomfortable. Like with Venus retrograde in Capricorn, through the winter months and early which plays out from the winter to the spring, and then the North Node and Uranus both in Taurus. It's kind of like, all right, reality. It's a lot of reality, but it's like, whoa, So just as like a general kind of what the nodes did and what they're about to do.
And the other thing about Scorpio and Sagittarius and Taurus is they're fixed placements, so the change are a lot more significant, and it's changes, and usually it's changes that are like it's not comfortable. So on a mundane sort of level, I already noticed like Facebook is changing to metaverse or whatever. They're changing like Facebook to metaverse, and I see all the people being like, "This is stupid," blah blah blah. So the way things have always been done are going to be changing probably drastically. I mean, we already see that, and it's really uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
that's, that's the nature of the fixed sign. It's like whatever kind of is really lodged in there is being dislodged, and usually it's met with a lot of resistance, because like, why?
Yeah. Totally.
This is the way I like my coffee. Like, why is it not the same
Yeah,
now?
totally. Yeah, no more creamer in your coffee. Like,
yeah,
now we put like turmeric and kombucha in it. Okay, so this is a partial lunar eclipse in Falcon, as we said, at 27 degrees Taurus, and this is the fifth lunar mansion that is described in the Picatrix as being the white spot. And the image for that is the head without a body. And so they're talking about the fixed star Algol, which is the eclipsing binary, the binaural star that Elodie was mentioning. And it is thought, it was considered in antiquity to be the head of the ghoul, and the gorgon's head. And this is what later becomes the head of Medusa. But we can see in Greek culture and into the Roman period, you'd see the gorgon on as an apotropaic motif above city gates, in like in houses, like on aegises, like worn on the sash of I think of Athena and or Zeus in the war with the Titans. Athena, I think. Yeah. So turning the staring face of the ghoul's head like back at the Titanic, oncoming Titanic horde, so like the primal forces of nature that make earthquakes and volcanoes and this like the very primal earth forming forces that are inhabitable by humans, on the tail of these Olympians who are trying to make a more civilized place to inhabit, kind of shooting its own eye rays back at it. So we get this nature of
eye rays.
Yeah, this nature of the ghoul, the gorgon's head that is kind of the image of raw, primal, uncontrollable nature, but it's also used for warding against itself, like against its own significations. And that's where, we have the gorgon's head at this period. Later on becomes the evil eye amulets you see in Greek culture, or the eyes painted on boats in Portugal. And then if we go back the other direction into Egyptian culture, it's where we see the eyes of Horus and things like this, which we'll talk more about because it weaves through the shape here as well, being Falcon.
Yeah, and I want to just go into a little bit of the actual star, like Algol, so the reason we talk about Algol right now with this eclipse is because the moon is literally being eclipsed at 27 Taurus, which is where Algol is located. And Algol is actually a binary star, which eclipses itself every 2 days. So it's like an eclipse within an eclipse. Which I find really interesting. So, every 2 days and 20 hours, they kind of pass in front of each other. It's like two stars. And if you look at the model of Algol, like the astronomical model, it's really cool looking. It's just like, there's like it's a pair of faint stars and they kind of alternate. So with the naked eye, it appears to be blinking basically. And so ancient people, associated that with like eyes, blinking demon eyes. And I want to also say that in the Chinese lunar mansion system, which is very different than the nakshatras, Vedic ones, and the lunar ones, it's called the hairy head mansion, and it's actually the 18, I believe, the 18 mentioned, and it's called the hairy head. So this theme of like head is coming through like in all tradition, Yeah.
Yeah, in a lot of weird different ways too. Like, if it's a head without a body and it's Algol, the head of the ghoul, and the in the Grimorium Verum, you see the spirit that would fall here is Flaherty, which the seal for that spirit being like just the head of a man, like a man's head, this large nosed man, and that's uncommon. You'll see like a lot of the rest of the sigils and the various texts are symbols or little drawings, but this is just like a person's head. So you can tell we're kind of like on the same page. And then the syncretized Eshu and Kambanda is Eshu Tiriri, which is a messenger of Ogum who uncrosses hexes and rights injustices and is considered dangerous. So it's like similar here that it's like both protective and it's sketchy, like just like Algol, right? Just like the Gorgon's head. And like, but then there's this weird thing there that like, if this is a messenger and it's just a head, then you start getting close to this, these traditions of magic heads throughout all of magic. Like you see it in all of the African traditional religions, and you see it in the Cyprianic texts, and you see it in the grimoires, and you see it in the PGM. This making of a head. Sometimes it's like out of cement or out of clay or out of like like a severed cat's head, like that you drown, or sometimes it's out of like someone who got their head cut off at a guillotine, and you're using coins in all their orifices, or you're using beans. But you see all of these this formula throughout a lot of cultures and geographies being consistent, and that's through that head you talk to the spirit world. And so if this is Algol and this is raw, primal, unmitigated nature, it's like the head is the in-between piece for you to be able to communicate with that realm. And then if we look how we looked at the 14 axes of sounds from the Prayer to Mene, in this case, it would be the Falcon mouse axis, which falls on the cry of joy. And then if we look to the Chinese 6 sounds that relate to the organs, one is mirthfulness. And that relates to what's called the Sun Jiao, which is the triple burner. And so this is the Sun Jiao, the triple burner is considered to be the body cavity, where all the organs are organized within. The triple being the upper, middle, and lower organs. And so if we look at the Picatrix material and the rest of the material, it's talking about a head without a body. And then if we connect through this cry of joy and what register that ends up on the organs, we get something that controls the triple system of the interior organs, and which we know through our investigations, a lot of these spirits are probably relate back to the organs because it's like the sky, because we live in a holistic reality, because our body is part of the world, not the metaverse, maybe not yet, but it's part it's part of the world we live in, and so is the sky. And if we live in symbiosis, then there's feedback between all this stuff. And so this head that is able to communicate to the unmitigated aspects of nature is also relating through this cry of joy in this this eclipse of eclipses, these eclipsing stars, these 2 eyes, like the evil eye, right? To be able to speak to and modulate and support the 3 hierarchies of organs, and also the 3 hierarchies of or 3 organ systems, and also the 3 hierarchies of spirits in the grimoire tradition, like what would be Satan, Beelzebub, and Lucifer, or later Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth, and then all the spirits beneath them as being kind of like spirits of the sky and spirits of the body, as the body began to be demonized in the Christian period. So, of course, these are all demons rather than that you can conjure through these illicit books, rather than it just being sort of like holistic texts of how to like communicate with your organs,
Yeah, and I want to go back a little bit to just so we talked about Algol like being located exactly where the eclipse happened, but this is happening in Falcon Mansion, and Falcon actually relates like a lot of the signification that came through Falcon through our research. There was a big aspect related to vision and seeing, but not seeing with the eyes also. I don't know if it's also because it's on the border of the Pleiades, and Pleiades is associated with sort of oracular vision. I think that's partly why. But if you think of Falcon and the vision and having this like overarching vision, there's really this, there's really the eye component here with the Falcon Mansion. And this eclipse happened here. Interestingly, you're not supposed to look at eclipse. This whole sort of symbolism with heads, and heads is only eyes. So there's really something about vision, about seeing, maybe not necessarily seeing with the eyes either, maybe through auricular means or something. But I feel like there's like an opening, there's like a visionary opening here, but it's also, it kind of needs to be remediated because it's so like you said, there's like it's kind of like both demonic and like healing simultaneously.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like
or protective, I should say.
Yeah, the protection and then the primal forces. Because if it's 21 Taurus to 4 Gemini, then it includes Algol and Alcyone, like the Pleiades key star. And so it's like you get the binary eclipsing, the blinking eyes of Algol, like the evil eye, you know, and then you get the oracular seven sisters and all of that. So you get which, like, you know, Taurus is like the Algol is like you're staring into the eyes of the predator, and then the what often the information that comes from these oracles, you know, related to the Pleiades, like the Sibylline traditions or the oracle at Delphi, the oracle traditions, is especially in the literature, like in the plays and of antiquity, was like you'd learn of things that of your own demise, like the way it's dramatized is like the tragedy, like, you know, you're being told that you're gonna like your whole life is gonna get fucked up and it's all your fault, and you're like, how could that be, how could I do that? Then you see it all play out. You know, like that's a narrative device, right? Like, but it's this like the delivery of this prophecy is not always like you go to see the oracle and they're like, no, looks good, looks like you're going to get a new job. They're like, no, they're telling you like how shit's going to go down, you know.
And so just to go back to Falcon for a second, and like the sort of eyes also, when I was researching the like just Algol and stuff like that, I came across the Cairo calendar papyri, which is like I don't know, 1500 BC, which is like supposedly a calendar that's built around the 2.80 like 2-day period of the Algol eclipsing. And this particular calendar actually shows Algol represented by Horus, and Horus is a falcon. So there's like a kind of looping around here with like just the Falcon Mansion, that while we associate Falcon with Lunar Mansion 5, and this where Algol is located, and this calendar is actually built on the binary Algol eclipsing, and Algol is represented as Horus. So
yeah,
there's like pretty substantial evidence that like that like Falcon, Horus, the eyes, there's like all this relationship.
This is one of the one that really pins the PGM list to the 28 in like a concrete way. We were like, yeah, that's definitely what that is.
And so like that, the Cairo calendar papyri show Algol represented as Horus, and sort of both signifying kingship. The text describing the actions of Horus as consistent with the course of events witnessed by a naked eye observer. so yeah, there's like a real component of like, what are you seeing, you know? What are you seeing and what are you looking at? And we've been on a tangent about images recently, and I think there's like an important component that's playing out just because we're so exposed to images and what is being eclipsed within us in terms of like when we stare at images, when we look at images, what actually happens to us physiologically, and like what's the implication of living in a virtual world. So I think, you know, just in terms of like what are you actually looking at?
Yeah, no,
it's
totally.
Like a simple way to think about like this season and this eclipse, for sure, and this tangent that we're on now, like this new series of eclipse.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, and with images, it's sort of like the pick of tricks is image magic, right? Like you make the image at a certain time, and then the image communicates with archetypally with you know, it's Neoplatonic, so with like whichever piece you're trying to key into, and then you bring more of that manifestation in the gravity of the indent of the talisman of the image that you brought life into, you breathed life into, right? So this image magic, that images have this emanating power and this creative power. And then, yeah, I guess partly what we're saying is that we look at a lot of images like on our phones and on the internet. We send images. People are showing us images all the time, and just sort of like be careful with images, that they're not inert. Like if we're going to start thinking all the time about that we're living in an animist paradigm, not like just that we fancy to when we're philosophizing or when we're doing our magic, but that's actually the worldview, then all of these images have a life to them. And as we see the technology that starts assembling itself around our media, that more and more whatever we take a picture of and whatever we create an image of is going to reverberate outward. And so for multiple reasons, you know, because they are coming for your
imagination,
you know, your imagination, and for your phone, for legal reasons, for like the images you store, but then also for your imagination itself, you know, like, yeah, just start to just be more mindful. Like, you know how there's always like, it's almost like a trope or something, right? But like as they started to show people who didn't have photography cameras around the world and they saw it for the first time, they'd be like, screw that, get that away from me, that'll steal your soul, no way, that's terrifying. It's probably literally true. You know, and like we just have to be careful of these eclipsing binaries that we're creating, you know, these like other images that eclipse over our image. But yeah, like if you look at
okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to kind of continue off other things you were saying, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the eye component is really significant just in terms of that placement, and then eclipse on top of it, and then like this sort of head without a body idea. If you think of the virtual world, it's like basically just like our head being involved with our body, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to just mention quickly is that this axis, like the Taurus Scorpio axis where the eclipse takes place, so this eclipse, this lunar eclipse, is being squared by Jupiter, pretty tight aspect, and Jupiter is in Aquarius, so that's like a mode we've been in. So this whole thing coming down the pipeline now is actually really challenging to whatever sort of has been happening for the last 2 years. It's almost like a wake-up call, and I don't say like, oh, everybody's going to wake up and then like everything is going to change. That's not what I'm saying, but it's a turning point in terms of like awareness and lucidity as we get deeper and deeper into these like formats where only our head is involved.
Yeah, it's also like we're in trouble because I mean it is like the being in late Taurus, the star, it's that nature of kind of will the crops fail. It's, you know, it's that part of nature that doesn't care for us. It's like nature provides for us, but there's the other part of nature that like doesn't care if we live or die, or is like strangulating snakes and poisonous plants and blights and diseases and insects and stuff. So like it's that speaks back to that kind of old European idea of perpetuating nature so it doesn't kill us, rather than the later idea of having these anthropomorphic civilized gods, that just kind of like are like a double for like a executive branch of the government or something, but just it's the snake cult, right? And like and just being like, okay, well, the predator is here, the world is climate collapse is like on everyone's mind, and all the paranoid stuff, right? Like is the president really the president? Who's in charge? Like the climate's going to collapse. Like, are they going to, are they poisoning us? Is it mass sterilization? All that stuff is kind of contained in the archetypes of Algol and like the cycle of the Falcon, Pharaonic, Horus stuff. Cause you have even the Picatrix says receiving the favor from kings. So it's this Horus was the sky, who is both so he has both luminaries in it, and that's why the eyes of Horus are the sun and the moon. And in the cycle of when Osiris gets dismembered by Set, then Isis finds finds Osiris's member half-eaten by a crab, which is the next lunar mansion over, it's Crab Mansion. She finds his member in the Nile, and through that she's able to use it to regenerate. Like she can still have sex with his severed penis, and then regenerate and make Horus, so that Osiris becomes the pharaoh in death and Horus becomes the pharaoh in life. And so you see this all through European culture too, these dying kings, these sacrificing kings who sacrifice themselves to the land, right? And that the idea is to be, if the pharaoh line can continue and the generational awareness of the figurehead, the head without a body, the figurehead of everything is stabilized, then the world doesn't have to be in chaos. It doesn't have to fall back into the uninhabitable chaos of the Titans, the age of the dinosaurs or something, things can just stay inhabitable by humans, right? And so there's these themes of the threatening of has separated from divine authority. It's gotten corrupted, and then there's a lot of paranoia about the world being going into chaos and becoming uninhabitable to us, and then having to keep your eyes on that, with the evil eye, watch behind your back, the warding and the apotropaic charms, as I always describe Algol to clients as if you're being followed by a mountain lion, you can't break eye contact with it. You have to keep looking at it as you move away from it, because if you turn your back, it'll attack you. And so this, with the things we're saying about these things emerging that are dangerous to us, one of my key phrases for 2022 is going to be, or starting now, is watch for the hijack, that everything that comes out into reality is being manipulated in the metaverse or whatever. So you have to watch, you have to keep attentive at what's going on, so you're not brainwashed. So if you're
brainwash, if you're just ahead too, I like that.
Yeah, brainwash. But if you stare too much at this, it's like staring at Medusa's head, the Gorgon's head, and you become petrified. You turn to stone. You can be so,
or you lose your head.
Or you lose your head. You can be so gripped with fear right now by looking into the Gorgon's face that you become overwhelmed by paranoia, and you're no longer able to function and no longer able to be effective. But you also have to keep attentive at the things that emerge, so that you understand the danger and understand what's encroaching, and that's why we get throughout history the Gorgon's head, the phallic apotropaic charms of the Mediterranean, the evil eye, the eye of Horus. There are all these things that are kind of I know nature is I know the world is also out to get me, So I have to keep it enough at bay so that I can kind of exist in this almost, it's funny that it's almost this liminal zone, you know.
So, okay, so if we know this, so what is the charm for the metaverse? What is the appropriate apotropaic charm for the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like, if we don't have that conclusion right now, that's a lot what the period between these two new lunations is trying to situate, you know.
I have tape on my phone camera for now.
Right. Yeah,
that's,
totally.
That's my charm for protecting my eyes.
But yeah, I mean, I would just rely on like whatever apotropaic and protective charms you have at your disposal. But also,
we're talking about like we're talking about like, if we're talking about the digital world, like the virtual world, I think like it's worth the effort to reconceptualize like what does that mean to have like I can't say that word.
Apotropaic,
apotropaic charm in the virtual world as an avatar. I know a lot of people just like literally just post some with their pictures online or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. Start with like the traditional ones and then work our way from there, like towards because we are in both the physical world and the metaverse, right? So it's like you're gonna have to do this like in your regular life as well as in like the
I'm just totally playing around.
No, I completely agree with you, but it's sort of just like I was just saying you'll probably find that shape by engaging with it, you know, in the physical, and then extending that in elsewhere. There's
something about parallel. There's something about pupils with like when you're engaging with your phone. There's pupils and like facial recognition bullshit and like the advertisement that you get, you know.
Yeah. Well, I wear those screen glasses, you know.
Yeah, that's not proven scientifically, Chris.
I know. But I was just saying, like, you could enchant some shades, you know.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of like sort of procedure for this like November 19 partial eclipse, like there's more steps, but like obviously like whatever you're looking at, like you're being you know, you're being
watched.
No, but also there's danger of being petrified, you know. So like very briefly to resume, like it's just like there's really something about the hypnotic quality here of this blinking star. So there's something very hypnotic, but also kind of to your demise. So vision and what you're looking at is really important. More extensively, this is also a place of oracular wisdom. So you know, in terms of if you're not actually engaging with internet or anything like that, you know, paying attention to dreams, premonitions, stuff like that, definitely significant place for that, I think. And there's such a thing as eclipse dreams, you know. So one of the first talisman I ever made was Falcon Mansion, like a Pleiades talisman for hair, and it's been like my favorite one. So I'm not saying make a talisman now with this eclipse.
No.
But there's definitely this kind of oracular quality filtering through, and on top of it, there's going to be eclipse dreams filtering through, which can be like pretty crazy. So
yeah, and this is like we said, it's, you know, there's the oracular quality of Algol, there's the oracular quality of Alcyone, where the North Node will be. There's the oracular quality of eclipses themselves. And if you watched our lecture at the Astromagia conference, you know, we were talking about this kind of way that we're working with things as being not as being holistic and not Neoplatonic. And maybe making a division between the talismanic tradition and the oracular tradition. And this eclipse is like kind of the oracular of the oracular, you know? And so it's kind of wanting to have your apotropaic charms so you can look into the oracular channels, you know? Like it's like being able to look and see without getting burned or overwhelmed, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like doing the sign of the cross before jumping or something.
Yeah, no, totally. No, it's exactly that. What's funny though, because it's like the being burned because of the sun, and the Horus being the sky, and then even I have a note of exactly who said this it was Clodius Oleanus wrote that the Egyptians called the god Apollo Horus in their own language, and so the Romans and Greeks. The Roman and Greeks were like, oh yeah, like the Egyptians call Apollo Horus, and then so when we look at the axis of Falcon and Mouse, which I was discussing earlier, being cry of joy, Mouse is also related to Apollo, like Mouse being like mice are related to Apollo, as Apollo is the far reacher, the one who affects from afar, and is related to both oracular, because it's sight, it's the sun, the oracular and the civic, but also like blights and and things getting like blights and plagues, things from coming elsewhere and like entering your sphere. And then so we see that with both Falcon and Mouse, this, as Horus was also thought of to be the far reacher, and the Falcon is on high and sees things from high up. Even in the Picatrix, it says, receiving favor from kings. So you get that whole and that king of the world, the king in the sky, the fecundity being stabilized through the king, which is interesting because in Leopard we saw conspiring against kings, and then of course it being the cry of joy, this access and mirthfulness, and that's able to what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like balance and supplement the all organ systems, the triple burner, the sun Jiao. There's this element of like oracularity, of warding, but also of your reaction to a destabilized world and a paranoiac world and a world filled with danger, to rejoice, to be like, because when the northern eclipses happen, a gate opens and things come into the world. And a lot of what Algol says is like, all right, here's some disaster from nature. And so there's a little bit of sort of like kind of reveling in it, to be like, all right, like if this is Aquarius and Uranus times still, and we get more squares in 2021 and 2022, it's a lot of nature versus society, a lot of technology versus nature. And to a degree, if you're on the side of nature, like we maybe want to like invite a little bit more of like, we want to ward away what's dangerous to us, and then like kind of gather like Athena, a war goddess, has the gorgon on her aegis to fight against the Titans. We kind of want to just start wearing the gorgon and like being on the side of nasty nature and like blasting against like totalitarian society and rejoicing in that. I don't know.
Nice agenda there. Yeah, there's other interesting aspects to this eclipse, like more extensively. Venus is in Capricorn. Venus rules, in the tropical scheme, Venus rules this eclipse from Capricorn, and Venus is slowing down and will be turning retrograde. On the day of the eclipse, Venus is actually trine Uranus exact, and that aspect is going to happen again in late January. So I feel like whatever sort of narrative we start embarking on at this point is going to get revisited again and again until springtime.
Yeah, because it's new things. Like if that's, because Venus is what? She's like exactly trine Uranus. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, it's like, so yeah, she's like,
the structure is shifting,
slowed down. Yeah. And then it's the moment where the gates open and things emerge. So it's like, here's the new things. And then, but
we're already seeing that. Like it's already happening. Like when we speak like, okay, November 19th, this eclipse happened, like, yeah, and there might be some like significant sort of events around this eclipse, but the themes, like the bigger arching themes, I think are already sort of like the players are being put on the board at this point, you know?
Yeah, we just get the new installments. That's why, like, I was saying, when I was whipping out like mass sterilization and like, is the president real and all these things, the things that, like, it's funny because it's Uranus in Taurus, and I've noticed that a lot of the, everyone's noted, that anytime something happens with Taurus and Uranus, that it tends to highlight more when Trump was still president, like the alt-right or whatever, like what did they call that? The insurgency at the Capitol or whatever. But it's kind of the working class being, and the paranoia of the working class, and so it's like these things that people think that aren't entirely real. They're just like a like exaggerated and fearful version of anxieties that are very contemporary, And,
yeah, and there's something about the late Taurus that has to do with preparedness, so hoarding and stuff like that.
Totally.
So
prepping.
Whatever transpires in terms of narrative in the collective with the new moon opposing Uranus, and then this eclipse, it's going to be a lot about supply shortage probably, and then people just kind of like being like possessed and mad about just like hoarding toilet paper again, but like at a next level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
because late degrees of a Taurus where this eclipse happened has a lot to do with like just like expecting the worst possible outcomes,
right.
And that's, and that's why I like the fact that you mentioned just like rejoice for the chaos, because it's actually, I think a lot of it is just it's just hubris.
Yeah, like on one level I wanted to be as heavy-handed as I was when I was laying that all out, and then on another I want to say it simply too, like, because there's the rejoice in the chaos, yes, and then I don't like feel affiliated with like what do they call that, like Extinction Rebellion or whatever, so that's not what I was trying to describe, but like but at the same time there's the rejoice in the chaos, but then there's also just on a more basic level of medicine, of just like the cry of joy, the mirthfulness, like it serves its own function. Like even it's like if things are going totally in chaos, you have your feng shui like garden dragons and your mirrors around to like push away influences that threaten your chi. So you have like your if it were England, you'd have your cottage magic warding stuff, like whichever culture you're referencing, you have your apotropaic and warding things active. And then even if if things are crazy around you, to almost separate, not just like rejoice in the chaos, but also remember to separate yourself from that and feel actual joy. Like
don't lose your head over it.
Don't lose your head. Yeah,
there's going to be so many opportunities if things transpires the way it looks like it will. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for losing your head, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah, and go look at nature. Like I went and walked the dog before we were recording, and it's a nice day today. It's cold, but or chilly. But I went outside and was like looking at like the layer of the clouds, then another layer of clouds, the light coming on it, then the layer of the mountains, and the layer of the trees, and the layer of the ground, and I just was kind of spellbound for like a few minutes. I was kind of able to totally take my mind out of the metaverse and almost remember before we were all on the internet, when my reality was just filled with moving around the world and going to different places and like being in nature, and it just kind of reconnected with me. So this like Algol like is about looking at nature, but also like kind of sorting through to find that like that current of raw unmitigated nature, and find that joy connection through the vision, and how that despite like a chaotic world, there's like keeping your eyes peeled helps you to like keep it all in order. I don't know. There's a lot here. It's hard to like sum it up. Like a lot of times when we try to wrap it up and wrap up everything of one of these shapes, Falcon shape ends up being pretty packed. And
that's one of the first place we really started getting like a lot of like insight right away that was filtering through. I remember because almost at the beginning I was like, this is a place of vision, this is a place about seeing, this is
totally.
And it was not even in relation to Algol or the eyes or anything like that at that point. It was just like what was coming through the drawings, what was coming through the writing. Talking about writing, I did pick some writing from last year. I don't have the date for this one, but it's approximately from a year ago. It's some channel writing from Falcon. I don't know if you want to read it.
Yeah, let me scroll up to it. Hurry, there is no pretending here but wisdom shoveled out of parcels like gold hiding in rocks. Sort out the raw, the material into the lively threads of learning not for you, for no purpose, other than transmitting the silver, the gold. It's not about the final shine, but why it shines. The light shines. The light insubstantial creates and transmits into rainbows with incandescent, luminescent charge. Hurry, the time is now, not later. The jewel is contained here, not later. Hurry. Precious extraction, not for the taking. Transmit. Fluid like money, flexible to be rich is not to hold, but to pass on the charge, in and out of the well. The infinite source. No other thing is more potent than to hold and let go. The return is well exceeded.
Bitcoins.
Yeah, actually, that's what I was going to say too. It's like, but not just Bitcoin, but like what can happen next other than currency, just like fluid transaction, but also like all this stuff about light and about refraction. And it had that nature of joy. But yeah, obviously we're going to see some changes in currency and commodity. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the big news that I think pretty much everybody's like aware of,
prepping for. I guess like, in all this rambling about joy and warding, I do want to mention that since it's cry of joy and since the Chinese like mirthfulness sound, it's like maybe the advice for the eclipse, other than just do all your normal eclipse remediation stuff, is like get ready for some oracular downloads. Make sure you have apotropaic warding practices like in place. Don't stare too hard at the news and get paranoid and petrified. And then when you practice your joy, do it vocally. You have to make a joyous sound.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
And then what's our advice for the new moon?
The new moon coming on November 4th. Well, know your poisons.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
know
like
your
it's like
poison.
when you go to the bar in the Wild West and they're like, "What's your poison?"
Yeah, I mean, like there's something about being intoxicated on the new moon, not necessarily like literally, but there's something about kind of maybe the desire to check out or dissociate in some ways. And just know the medicine for that too.
Yeah.
What's the counter medicine for dissociation, or for just like, for example, if you drink a lot, you'll make sure to have some kind of like electrolyte the next morning or something like that. Like if I know that I'm gonna like have a couple bottled wines or something, I'm gonna make sure I have like juice or something.
Yeah.
But
because it's the intaking of poison and then the
solution
like,
to
the solution. Yeah.
And that we could just like go on a tangent about that, like in terms of how this might show up, because it's literally like, okay, like vaccine effects, like the solutions for that could be just like the mundane. Then it could also be just like deciding to dissociate in some ways, or to check out, to like, I don't know, like online or whatever, but just like balancing that with the medicine, balancing your poison with the medicine, and just kind of like observing where that happens. But the new moon is definitely visceral, and it's definitely not like a heady place. It's like a very
Right.
compulsive sort of place. So it's driven by instinct and desires and smells and stuff like that. So you might not even be able to think yourself into this one in a way. Like it's just nature doing its thing.
But also, like, yeah, prepare yourself to go on a little dark vacation. If it's like dark sanctuary and the pleasures of light and darkness and the leopard and the tantric experience, it's like, just make sure that, you know, you're like, all right, I have a little moment to check out, like you were saying, and just like have a little dark party with myself and whoever else, like, because even the Picatrix says it separates friends.
Yeah.
Like
it's really like, about personal power and like the measurement of personal power. There's something definitely, and Mars is going to be just newly in Scorpio with this new moon, so there's really something about reappropriating your own energy. What does it do? Like, where does it want to go and stuff like that? You know?
So like go off by yourself and have like an antisocial like drinking party, and then like come back with some like some healing, you know?
Yeah, like a cathartic experience. And also it's just kind of like you know, more extensively, the catharsis serves as like renewal, you know, so it's not in vain, but it's pretty destructive place in general with, you know, with Uranus also opposing.
It's the seed for the eclipse that happens on the cry of joy axis. So it's sort of like you have a cathartic experience, but you kind of learn your war cry, which is a cry of joy. Like you're kind of like, woo, you know.
If like, you're Jupiterian ruled, maybe.
Or you're whoopee, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, the cries that animals make, or when you hear animals making, like coyotes.
It's easy for you to say you have Jupiter there.
but you know that laughter of coyotes is kind of like it's this almost sinister laughter, you know. But it's still,
it's like the predatory laugh in the night.
Exactly. It's their own kind of joy. Like, so get your predatory laugh in the night organized so you can have kind of your Algol joy, your chaos rebel. Okay, I think we're looping around plenty of times here. Do you have anything else to say? Okay.
No.
Well, thanks very much for
have
attending.
A good ride out there.
Yeah, totally.
Enjoy the ride.
Yeah, enjoy the leopard ride. Ciao. Thank you for listening to Liminal Light. You can find me at atavisceral.com, atavisceral.com, where I post forecasts and articles and offer astrological and divinatory services. For more discussions on the moon, go to lunarzodiac.com and sign up for our mailing list to find out about lectures, workshops, dreaming groups, events, appearances, publications, and whatever else. Now that the show is back on track, there's a bunch more guests lined up to discuss what is going on in the sublunar realm. We'll see you there.